I thank the Speaker for recognizing me, and I'm grateful to have this opportunity to discuss an issue that's important to every single American family, the quality of our nation's schools. 25 years ago this week, the National Commission on Excellence in Education issued its landmark report entitled "A Nation at Risk: The Imperative for Education Reform." I'd like to read an excerpt from the opening of that report, and I quote, "Our nation is at risk. Our once unchallenged preeminence in commerce, industry, science, and technological innovation is being overtaken by competitors throughout the world. While we can take justifiable pride in what our schools and colleges have historically accomplished, the educational foundations of our society are presently being eroded by a rising tide of mediocrity that threatens our very future as a nation and as a people. What was unimaginable a generation ago has begun to occur. Others are matching and surpassing our educational attainments." Again, this report was written 25 years ago, and some of the things we're going to talk about tonight are how little improvement we have made in that 25 years. When this report was released, it sent shockwaves through our educational system. For the first time, we recognized the threat of educational failure as a threat to our national security. And to be frank, I don't think that was overstating the case. I have personally traveled to China with other members of Congress and seen the progress they are making scientifically, technologically, and yes, educationally. And China is not alone. All around the world, nations are realizing that educational excellence today will mean competitive dominance tomorrow. A Nation at Risk was issued nearly 2 decades after enactment of the Elementary and Secondary Education Act. The ESEA, which was the precursor of No Child Left Behind, dramatically increased federal funding for education. Unfortunately, it didn't link that funding to a demand for results. From 1965 until enactment of No Child Left Behind in 2002, the federal government spent more than $227 billion on the Elementary and Secondary Education Act. Yet despite that considerable investment, academic achievement flatlined during that time period. As you can see here, the graph shows the amount of money appropriated year by year, and the blue flat line is the test results during that period. This is unacceptable. It's unacceptable to the taxpayers being asked to fork over their hard-earned dollars to a bloated federal bureaucracy that fails to produce results. It is unacceptable to parents who should be empowered to seek out a quality educational experience for their children. And it is unacceptable to our citizenry as a whole, who deserve an educational system that strengthens our prospects for the future. A Nation at Risk outlined dire consequences if we, as a nation, failed to improve our schools. In the quarter century since that report was issued, we've seen a number of positive education reform movements, each of which, if allowed to succeed, could make a real difference to students. I'd like to discuss just a few of those reform movements now. First, A Nation at Risk energized those who support educational freedom. There are many who believe a lack of competition in our public schools is a major force behind their stubborn lack of improvement. Rather than permitting the educational establishment to maintain its stranglehold on educational options, we need to give parents the right to decide how their children will best be educated. Another key education reform principle that emerged in the wake of A Nation at Risk was the drive to improve teacher quality. In fact, an entire section of the report was dedicated to improving teacher quality. In 1983, the report highlighted a shortage in highly qualified teachers of key subjects like math, science, and key foreign languages. It also called for innovative strategies like performance-based pay to recruit and retain effective teachers. 25 years later, we're still facing a shortage of teachers in these critical subjects. And we're still fighting to be able to treat teachers as the professionals that they are by rewarding them for their performance. But perhaps the most fundamental education reform movement that has come about in the years since A Nation at Risk is the No Child Left Behind Act. That's because NCLB sought to change the expectations at the very core of our education system. Instead of accepting mediocrity, NCLB demands that every child in America be given the opportunity to succeed. You know, it's a real indictment of the educational system of the past that it was considered radical to expect every child to merely be able to read and do basic math. But that is the mentality that NCLB is trying to change. Unfortunately, despite these and many other efforts to improve our nation's schools, we're still a long way from educational excellence. And so I would submit that our nation is still at risk. We have an education establishment that puts preservation of the system above elevation of the student. We have children trapped in chronically underperforming schools and parents with little or no ability to send them elsewhere. We have teachers leaving the profession because they're frustrated with a system that fails to recognize and reward success. And we have a majority in Congress that has refused to take the next step toward education reform by making much-needed reforms to No Child Left Behind. Tonight, some of my friends and I on the Education Committee are going to take a look at the nation at risk 25 years later. From where I sit, the education landscape in this country is often disappointing, yet hopeful as well. Reformers from all ideological perspectives continue to push for better schools, greater education reform, and a commitment to competitiveness that will allow us to thrive in the 21st century and beyond. Education reform is a daunting challenge, but one that cannot be ignored.